Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. This week, we dig into the aspirations of a small southern European country seeking to join the European Union, just as the wheels appear to be coming off the euro. In the second half of our show, we'll speak with renowned economist David Malpass about the challenges of central banking and the strange box canyon the world's monetary system seems to have gotten itself into. Up first, we welcome Nikola Poposki, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Macedonia, the most peaceful and prosperous breakaway republic from the former Yugoslavia. Minister Poposki, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
Minister, it's with some trepidation that I asked Macedonia's foreign minister on the program, because most Americans can tell you all about Kim Kardashian's buttock enhancements, but couldn't find Macedonia on a map if their lives depended on it. The Balkans have been a flashpoint throughout European history, but why should Americans care about it now?
That's a pretty good question. I think that the most important thing is that I'm convinced that Kim Kardashian would be able to locate Macedonia on the world map. We can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a positive result. On the second part of the question concerning Balkans, it's pretty sure that it hasn't been always associated with good news. Most of people will remember the wars, the conflicts, and dismantlement of Yugoslavia, these sort of things. But this is all history. I mean, 25 years is a pretty long period in human life. And today, if you're able, as American citizen, to pay a visit to Macedonia, I think that you will be amazed. Most of Americans I know that came for once in Macedonia, they keep coming back, which means that there must be some magic.
You've got some good tourism going.
Yes, true. Most of our tourists are from the region, so Greeks would be the most numerous tourists nation-wise. For American tourists, obviously, it is more exotic destination. We're in the halfway between Turkey and Italy, surrounded by countries like Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Kosovo, Albania. But you have some really nice landscapes, and our major asset, I would say 90% of people that have paid visit to Macedonia, is hospitality. Something that is unmatchable on a world scale, I would say.
You'll have to give that a try at some point. But, the history goes back quite a ways. I mean, all the way back to Alexander the Great. I wonder if you can give us at least a little bit of perspective of Macedonia when it was part of Yugoslavia and what it was like to live under socialism and the rule of Marshal Tito.
For me, it will be pretty difficult. I was born in 1977, so I was a kid. I remember that I was a teenager when Yugoslavia dismantled. Generally, this is a period that was associated with quite some comfort. You had a guaranteed work. There was no unemployment. You didn't need to worry about the market forces because this was an entirely controlled market, and life was pretty comfortable at the surface. Obviously, in parallel with that, you had quite a lot of handicaps. This was a country with a single-party political scene, and obviously a lot of repression if you're not in line with the party views on many things. This was the period of Tito, as you said, so since starting from end of World War II until beginning of 90s. 90s is when Yugoslavia was dismantled. Then you had all the republics that emerged, and they have become independent democratic states that are mainly focused today on the economy. The biggest challenge is to create jobs, to be more competitive, and eventually to join NATO and the European Union. I'm pretty sure that Alexander the Great would be proud with what we're doing right now in terms of reforms.
It sounds like Macedonia didn't experience the kind of terrible repressions that other countries behind the Iron Curtain did during Soviet times.
It's true that it was a completely different system, so I think that Yugoslavia was somehow playing somewhere between the East and the West. It was definitely not part of the Warsaw Pact, and Tito got Stalin mad at the late 40s, and there was a serious breakup politically. Yugoslavia was the only actually socialist country in Europe that was completely outside of Soviet sphere of influence. On the other side, this was a period when Yugoslavia was flirting quite a lot with Western countries without adopting the model of free economy. So having a controlled economy, single-party system, but still pretty liberal for socialist standards of that time. We were enjoying abundance of food, Western type of products, and life was pretty much comparable to the rest of European countries.
And he managed to hold together some pretty conflicting social groups and ethnic groups. There was a lot of violence when Yugoslavia was broken up. Of course, we know the history of what went on in Kosovo and Serbia. How did Macedonia avoid all the violence?
We were a unique example in these terms. It was the only republic that did not get involved in a conflict during the dismantlement of Yugoslavia, which was a success story. On the other side, there were many elements that would have been able to say that we were heading into a conflict, because Macedonia is a pretty mixed society. I would say Europe on a small scale, because you have majority Christians, but you have an important Muslim community. You have Macedonians that speak Macedonian, but you have many communities that have a different language or culture, like Albanians, Turks, Valacs, Serbs, and many others.
And it's about 2 million people, something like that?
Roughly 2.1 million people are living in Macedonia, and many Macedonians or people having Macedonian descent around the world. Pretty large diaspora, mainly in Australia, Canada. United States is one of the destinations as well.
And I understand that there's a big Macedonian community in Detroit?
True. Some of them have immigrated in the early 20th century, some of them after World War II. Others are more recent diaspora, which immigrated during the Yugoslav time.
So Macedonia managed to navigate the breakup of Yugoslavia without too much violence. You've embarked on a number of economic reforms that seem to be working. Tell us about that.
Well, we didn't have much of a choice. To be honest, being Macedonian in the early 90s, you had the advantage of not being involved in a conflict, as the rest of former Yugoslavia was. But you had a disadvantage of being in the middle of the Balkans with quite a lot of economic blockages and mess happening around you. So you needed to be pretty skilled in order to make your economy survive. To put you into the picture, most of Macedonian companies were scaled for a market of 25 million people, which was Yugoslavia, and another potential market of some 100 countries around the world that were part of the non-allied movement, which was sphere of influence of Tito's Yugoslavia. So after having such an environment and pretty secure environment, we faced embargoes, fighting going around, and wars pretty much around everywhere in Yugoslavia.
How did the young people deal with that? You were a teenager at the time, yeah?
Yes, true. I remember I was 13, 14 at the time of dismantlement of Yugoslavia. We were hanging around our neighborhood and sitting on the bench. I remember very well the dates where we were organizing the independence referendum. The biggest discussion that we were having at that time was whether, as of tomorrow, we're going to have milk in the shops. The perception was that Macedonia is going to run out of milk.
Gee.
This was the major concern of teenagers discussing politics at that time.
I guess it's better than running out of toilet paper the way they are in Venezuela.
That is a challenge as well. Finally, it turned up that none of this was true, because countries survived. We have shifted quite quickly to market economy, not without damage. We have faced periods where roughly half of the population was jobless because of closing up of all those big companies. But within several years, we have been able to manage our economy, stabilize exports, imports, and have pretty exemplary macroeconomic policies. If you look at it right now, I mean, Macedonia was ranked somewhere on the 100th position on World Bank's doing business report. Today, we are the 30th best place to do business on earth.
Yeah, it's really got quite a track record.
And we are the third best reformer on the European continent.
And is there much of a history of entrepreneurism and business startups in Macedonia, or are there people learning it for the first time?
I think that we had a very extensive tradition of entrepreneurial skills, of people creating their own businesses. We had pretty tough break between 1945 and then the late 80s, when entrepreneurial operations were discouraged for mainly political reasons. It was not really seen as a compatible thing with socialism, even though private ownership was allowed to some extent. But that remained in the genes, and many Macedonians right after the breakaway from Yugoslavia have started their own businesses. So now you have guys that are running their own dairy industries and exporting cheese down to America. So you can even buy Macedonian cheese in Detroit or other spots in the US. We have pretty competitive agricultural sector. We have very good wines, and I would recommend to some of your listeners, actually to all of them, to taste some Macedonian wine. It's a really remarkable quality and excellent value for money.
Minister, looking at the history of the area, I see that you've got a bit of an argument going with Greece over your country's name. Tell us about that.
It sounds pretty funny because it looks like a family dispute. Relations between Greece and Macedonia are really excellent in all fields, mainly in economy, where if you take the top 10 Macedonian companies, Greece would have very serious stakes in at least 6 of them. Mm-hmm. If you look into the tourism, for example, Macedonians would be the 3rd largest number of by nationality tourists going to spend holidays in Greece, just right after the British and German tourists. We have very extensive cooperation in the cultural field, cross-border cooperation. So things are really happening as we were one family.
So what's the beef?
The one and only issue is a political one and mainly concerns, I would say, some mythological perspectives on the fact whether Macedonia is seen as part of a Greek cultural sphere or whether we should stick to modern standards of nations being able to determine their names, the way they see themselves, and then make sovereign decisions. This was an issue that emerged in the early 90s when Macedonia broke up from Yugoslavia. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there was a heavy campaign on the Greek side that recognizing Macedonia as an independent country would mean that Macedonia will have territorial ambitions to get a portion of the territory of today's Greece.
Is there any truth in that? I mean, does anybody want to try to take over neighboring territories?
Well, by any standards, this is a nonsense. One of the reasons why it is a nonsense is because it has never happened and there is nothing that will sustain such an idea. By the way, we have an agreement that goes back to 1995, bilateral agreement, which provides all sorts of guarantees on non-violability of borders. The second item is that we are so much interlinked with Greece that we definitely have more common interests than separate ones.
You can't afford to fight with each other.
Our major ambition on the international political scene is to join NATO and EU. Both of these clubs, Greece is a member already. So if we were part of the same club, how can one even think about anything concerning changes of borders?
Isn't the conflict of the name the one thing that's preventing Greece from backing your entry into NATO and the EU?
It has been used as an excuse. In practice, it is literally a nonsense because it is based on the fact that the geographic region of Macedonia crosses or goes beyond the borders of Republic of Macedonia. So you have a region that is called Macedonia also in Greece. But this is more of a rule than an exception in European and global terms. You also have the state of Luxembourg and you have a region of Luxembourg in Belgium. You also, as far as I know, have a city that is called Macedonia in the United States, somewhere in Ohio. You also have a place that is called Athens in the United States, and as far as I know, none of this means that the United States has any territorial ambitions regarding Greece.
Well, we've stolen a lot of names, but we usually put new in front of it, like New Mexico, New York, New Jersey. Why don't you just call yourself New Macedonia?
Well, because there is no distinction with the old Macedonia, and I think that we already have a distinction, which is Republic of Macedonia. Mm-hmm. And in today's world, I think that we should allow people living in a country decide on their names, same way as we will allow you to call yourself Bill or myself Nikola.
Well, Nikola, let me ask you, you're determined to join NATO and the European Union. When the Ukrainians tried that, it led to a Russian invasion. Do you worry about Russia's reaction?
Well, as far as I know, no one has objected Macedonia's ambition to join both NATO and EU. Mm-hmm. And there is a long-standing pattern of us making steps in joining NATO and EU. I don't think that there is any viable alternative to this process. If we exclude Greece's objection based on the name issue, then I think that getting Macedonia into the European Union and NATO will be a strong signal of stability and prosperity in the wider Balkans region.
Joining the European Union is an interesting aspiration, but the European Union is struggling right now. Growth has pretty much stopped, and Greece, of course, is a mess. One wonders whether the euro will survive. What's your view on that?
It is true that if you look from the outside, that Europe has many challenges to overcome. But none of the challenges that Europe has to overcome is really linked to the fact that countries have joined or it has extended. Quite the opposite. I think that newcomers in the European Union have brought some competitive advantages, and finally this is a political project before anything else. For Macedonia, getting into the European Union would bring better predictability in economic terms. It will offer better market perspectives. And for a country of 2 million people in the middle of Southeastern Europe, there isn't a better perspective than being part of the richest club on earth.
Would you want to hold on to your own currency, or would you also try to adopt the euro?
In practice, we have national currency that is pegged to the euro for the last at least 15 years. So for us, adopting the euro wouldn't mean a big change. Obviously, we're not going to do that unilaterally, and there will be time when this is going to happen anyways. But in the meantime, we are really pegged to the euro.
Looking south and looking what the euro has done to Greece and the mess with Syriza, what do you forecast is going to happen ahead down there? Are they going to stay inside the euro? Will they keep using that currency, or are they going to have to go back to the drachma?
Well, frankly speaking, I don't think that the euro has caused the damage to the Greek economy that they have suffered in the last period. By the way, this is not good news for us, because Macedonia's economy is quite extensively linked to the Greek one.
Sure.
Roughly 60% of our exports and imports are going through Greek ports, and Greece is always one of the top 5 trading partners for Macedonia, and also one of the top 3 investors in the country. So this is not good news for us. But euro is not really the reason for that. I mean, one can challenge whether the budgetary management or the debt management in the country was done in an appropriate way. And I think the legitimate question that one should ask, whether they shouldn't have left the Eurozone at the first wave of the crisis, which was already 5-6 years ago backwards.
Rather than going deeper into debt.
Precisely, because it seems that the crisis hasn't been overcome, and management hasn't improved in the meantime either.
Well, Greeks are famous for not paying their taxes, and they love their restrictive labor laws that make it really hard to start businesses there. How does that compare to Macedonia?
Well, we have tackled some of those issues much earlier. I think in the last 10 years, we have done some serious and dramatic changes and reforms in terms of fiscal discipline. And you wouldn't be able to buy an ice cream in downtown Skopje without getting a fiscal ticket. So fiscal evasion has been really constrained on one side. And on the other side, we have adopted a policy of a flat tax. So we tax at 10% income tax on the basis of a broad base.
No kidding.
So no discrimination on the level of wealth, but we tax everyone. And that policy has brought us in the situation to have the 3rd lowest debt level in Europe, which is roughly 40%, and to have a deficit that rarely exceeds the 3%.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. A 10% flat tax, you can fill out your tax on a postcard every year. How do we get some of that over here in the U.S.?
Well, we have started from the point of view that if you want to create jobs, if you want to have a competitive economy, you shouldn't tax too much, but you should tax everyone. So we went across the board, and we've extended our fiscal base, and we decreased our tax rate.
Well, at 10%, it's not even worth the trouble of evading the tax. You might as well just pay it.
Precisely, that's the logic.
So, Minister, give us a little background on the political parties that are active in Macedonia. Is there a strong socialist movement? Is there a right-wing movement that's come up as it has in Greece? What does the scenery look like there?
Well, there is a pretty much comparable spectrum of political parties in the country as in most of the European countries. You will have a strong center-left political orientation, which in our case is the Social Democratic Party of Macedonia. Then you will have center-right, which is more conservative party, which is the ruling VMRO DPMNE. Then you will have quite a lot of political parties that have an ethnic prefix. So typically the Albanian-speaking community in Macedonia will have a few political parties. The Turkish-speaking one will have few political parties. Serbian, Balak, etc. And I would say as much as we might have divergent views on different type of policies, for example, tax policies are one of them, and the ruling party has been the one that has instaured 10% flat tax. Others have been more likely to wish to have some gradual taxation. We all have one common denominator, which is we all agree that Macedonia should be part of the European Union and NATO. And that gets roughly 90% of support level at all public opinion polls.
So, Nikola, the future belongs to the youth, and one of the biggest problems in the southern European countries is youth unemployment and the youth diaspora, young people who have ambition and are entrepreneurial getting up and leaving. Are the young of Macedonia sticking around to build the economy?
This is pretty sure. We are not an exception from the average Southern European case, which means that we have a serious challenge to create jobs for youngsters. And we do that by aggressively advertising our country for foreign direct investments. And this has paid back because roughly 20,000 jobs have been only created through foreign investments during the last year. And on the other side, we have had a pretty extensive program from the government side on offering financial and other type of supports for youngsters to start their own business. Because this is the future of the country. We need to have and to enable our young population to have a successful business and find their space into our economy rather than immigrate in another country and then try to have better living perspectives over there. So this is the key challenge for the country on the next 10 years horizon.
Well, Minister, good luck with that. It's been a pleasure having you on the show and learning more about your country. Thanks for being on.
Thank you very much. And I think that the most important thing would be to multiply examples like myself, people who have been studying and living abroad for many years, deciding to come back to Macedonia and invest themselves in their own country. So I hope that we're going to have more and more these cases happening, and this will be a good signal that we're on the right track. Thanks a lot for inviting me again.
That was Nikola Poposki, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Macedonia, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Special thanks to our affiliate WROM Detroit for persuading the minister to come on the show. We invite WROM listeners to check out Real Clear Radio on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Real Clear Frezza. And stop by RealClearMarkets.com, my go-to place for diverse views on political economics. Ahead, David Malpass, former senior economist in both the Reagan and first Bush administrations, holds court on global economics and monetary policy. Stay tuned.